Wouldn't it be nice to have an AI assistant at workplace that helps us all increase their productivity? In this session, through a series of demos, we'll showcase how you can easily build a generative AI assistant designed specifically for work using Amazon Q Business. I'm Prasad Rao. I'm a Principal Solutions Architect here at AWS in London.
And I'm Danilo. I'm part of the developer relations team at AWS. So let's see how that can work. So generative AI brings the promise of help us be more productive. And if we think of that, there are many things that we do in our daily jobs that could be simplified. So for example, a marketing manager might need to pull out a lot of information from different sources to create a data sheet or to create a product web page and maybe tailor that content to a specific persona. A sales manager may start working with a new account, so he wants to pull out all the previous history from all the different data sources inside the company. He needs to see all the meeting notes, all the documents that's been exchanged with the customer, the presentations, and it's a lot of activities just to be prepared for their first meeting. Engineers and developers, they need to have access to the deep technical documents of a company that maybe explain why in the past some specific decisions has been taken to create a specific integration or a new product. And help desk employees, they need to access all the customer information and the internal knowledge bases to quickly find a solution to a customer problem. And product managers, probably they do a little bit of everything above because their role is so broad, and they need to have access to all kinds of information inside a company and put it into a human-readable format. Actually, there have been quite a few studies, like this one from McKinsey last year, that shows that if we use generative AI and the capability of generative AI of processing text and simulate a sort of reasoning around this text really can help us make things faster and probably save up to 25% of our time during our daily job. That means that we can have 2 more hours every day that we can spend to do something more interesting and more important for our profession. But when we speak with customers, there are quite a few challenges. And these are probably the top 3. The first one is accuracy. If you played with large language models, LLMs, you know that they tend to create a plausible solution to your question, but that's not always true. And customers, they want facts. So they want information that can be tracked down back to their enterprise data sources. They don't want generic information in their answers from a generative AI interface. And also, many organizations, they already have their complex access permissions policies already set up, and they expect a new generative AI application to honor those policies and those permissions. So that, for example, maybe a security team has access to a working document that is being produced at the time, but not the rest of the company. Or if there is a new project that is confidential, only the people working on that project can receive information from those documents, but not everyone inside the company. And finally, organizations, they expect time to value, so they don't want to create another long-term project just to have the idea that in the future they will get back some speed up and some improvement in the daily work through generative AI.
And that's why we built Amazon Q and released in preview at reInvent 2023. Amazon Q is a new style of generative AI designed specifically for your work that can be tailored for your business to have conversations, generate content, brainstorm ideas, solve problems. And it helps not only in conversation search, but as Danilo mentioned, it also ensures that it has the right security controls. To give you a broad capabilities of Amazon Q, we have integrated Amazon Q across all of AWS. Starting with Amazon Q Business, it can be deployed using your data for your organization. Then we have Amazon Q Developer that helps boost the productivity of the developers and helps transform the way you build, operate, and deploy applications and workloads on AWS. Then we have Amazon Q for our business intelligence service, Amazon QuickSight, We also have Amazon Q for our contact center service. And coming soon is Amazon Q for AWS supply chain. But today in this session, we are going to focus specifically on Amazon Q Business. And if we talk about key features of Amazon Q Business, the experience is divided in two parts. One is for the end user or the employees who will be using the Amazon Q, and one is for the enterprise admins who will be configuring and deploying Amazon Q applications. Now we'll look into, through the demos, both the experiences. We'll configure and deploy our Amazon Q from scratch, and then we are going to use it as an end user. And for the end user features, you can have a conversational search with them, asking them questions, upload doc files, and analyze the content. And for the admins, it's a fully managed solution. That means you can deploy it using simple steps. And we'll look through that in the demo in a moment. And we have pre-built connectors, more than 40. What it means is that these connectors helps you to crawl the data, removing the heavy lifting. It is able to extract the content, understand the metadata, permissioning, break it into chunks so that it can be right-sized into the index and make it easy for quick retrieval from the semantic index. Let's look into a demo of how it works.
Yeah, let's create together our first Q Business application. So if I go into the Q Business console, I choose to create a new application, and then I enter a name for my application. I can ask Q to manage permissions for me by creating a service role. I can fine-tune optionally encryption using AWS KMS, so to choose which keys to use for encryption. And then I can create the app. And then I can choose the retrievers. So if you already invested on Amazon Kendra, you can connect your existing indexes and data sources, or you can use the new native retriever of Amazon Q. And this comes with all the connectors that Prasad mentioned. And you just need to cite the index. So 1 unit is for up to 20,000 documents, so probably is a good start for any proof of concept. Now that the application and the retriever are configured, I can start to connect data sources. I can connect documents on S3. I can import internal or external websites. I can upload files like my company knowledge base, so that is shared across all sessions. And then I can connect databases, my private databases, CRM systems. I can connect file repositories. I can connect email system or chat systems. I can connect using GitHub code repos, so that the content of these repos is part of the conversation, and so on. So to start, let's use some documents on S3. So I have an S3 bucket with some documents. These are research papers. They are actually the same that you saw this morning in the keynote. And these research papers cover a lot of different topics, including transportation. That is a topic that I am quite interested about. So we have this bucket. All the files are there. Let's create the S3 data source. So I give the data source a name. Optionally, I can use a VPC to connect to the data source, depending on your configuration. Again, I ask Q to manage permissions for me. I ask to create a service role that will give permissions to Q to connect and read data from this bucket. And then I go on S3 to browse my buckets. This is the one that I want to select. And let's choose this one. There are some advanced settings, and we'll go into that in another demo that is more focused on permissions. And I can choose sync mode. Sync mode means when I run a synchronization, I want all data to be synced or only the new, modified, or deleted content. And then I can choose the schedule on which to run the synchronization. It can be hourly, daily, custom, or I can choose to run on demand. And this is also available as an API. At the end, I can fine-tune the mapping of the metadata depending on the data source, and then I can add the data source here. So for the second data source to add, I'm going to use the web crawler. You can import internal or external websites here. Let's use Our World in Data. So Our World in Data is a public website from a no-profit organization in the UK that wants to make the knowledge about our world more accessible, and everything is available with a permissive Creative Commons attribution license. So let's copy the URL of this website, and let's go back to the Q console. Here I can just add one or more URLs, or I can use sitemaps if I want. I have only one URL, so I paste that here. Depending on the website, you can configure authentication. Multiple forms of authentication are natively supported. And depending on your network configuration, you might need to configure a web proxy, maybe to access an internal or an external website. Again, I can choose to use a VPC for network connectivity. And again, I'm going to ask Q to manage the permissions with the service role for me. Here I can choose if I want to follow links outside of the original domain or not during the web crawling of the website. I only want to stay on the domain and subdomain. And there's other options to fine-tune the crawling. And similar to before, I have sync mode. So let's do a full sync this time, every time. And then I choose to run this on demand and not on a schedule. And as you can see, the metadata for a web crawler is slightly different than from S3. There's more information. And you can fine-tune that if you want. So now we have created the two data sources because I chose to run them on demand. The synchronization process didn't start. So I go back to my newly created app, and I look for the two data sources, and I manually start synchronization. This is also available as an API, so you can put that into your workflow. So if at some point you ingest data, you can trigger synchronization when it makes sense. So synchronization takes some time, depending on the size of the data. So to make things faster, I created another application with the same configuration, and I already ran synchronization on this. This application is not being deployed, but I can preview the web experience straight from the console, and I can start to fine-tune the web experience. So I can change the title and the subtitle to my specific organization, what's the purpose of this AI assistant. I can also fine-tune the welcome message to clarify to the end users what they should expect, and maybe provide some sample questions that can help them start using the tool in the right way. This is very important. Here I can also fine-tune boosting. Boosting is a way to weight differently the content that is retrieved. So for example, I can say that the title of the document is more important than the content. This means that I go to more authoritative sources. Or I can fine-tune the updates on updates. So maybe I want to boost content that has been more recently updated in the last 3 to 12 months, so that this content gets more visibility than other. For now, I'm not going to fine-tune boosting for this use case, but it's there, and there are other options that I don't have the time to explain. So let's ask our first question. So as I mentioned, there's some documents here that talk about transportation. So as many people here, I started cycling during the lockdown of 4 years ago. So let's ask, does cycling improve mental health? Q is thinking, and we get an answer. As you can see, the answer contains some numbers that are the citations from specific sources. And here I can see that the source is a document on S3 that it's been taken and indexed by the synchronization process. Let's ask a second question in the same session. And now I'm asking, walking, cycling, or train for the lowest footprint? Footprint here is without any context, but the session context allows Q to understand that I'm talking about carbon footprint. And this time I have two sources. One source is a document on S3, and one source is from the web crawl website. And what is important is that you can choose and click on those sources to fact check that actually what is written there is correct, and maybe add or grab more information if you might need. This is how you can use it from the web experience, but everything is available as an API. So here I'm using the AWS CLI, but you can use any of our SDKs. I'm using the chat sync API of QBusiness. I have to specify the application ID that I took from the console, the user ID, because I'm bypassing authentication. I just say who I am. And then the user message, so what I'm asking in the chat. It's the same question as before. So as you can expect, I'm going to get a very similar answer, but in a very nice JSON document format that I can use in my application, for example, to integrate this maybe with a search box, or as you will see later on, you can integrate this with Slack and put Q as part of your conversation in the company.
Thanks, Andrew. We have seen how easy it is to configure a Amazon Q application, and it's easy for even users to query it. But let's talk about safety and security, something that is on top of the mind of every enterprise admin. Now, all these documents in enterprises, generally they are, the level of access to these documents is defined by the roles that they have, the permissioning that these documents would be having in terms of which users will be able to access them. And that all is controlled in enterprises through an INT provider with the users and group info. So when the data is crawled by Amazon Q, it not only crawls the data, but also crawls the document permissioning. That is access control lists, ACL associated with these documents. So it has the information about who is able to access which document. So when a user makes a query, the response is a permission filtered response. So you don't have to worry about any sensitive information being leaked throughout the organization to all the employees. The user gets a response based on the documents the user has access to. Now let's look into how INT crawling works behind the scenes before we get into the demo about how we can configure it. Now let's say a user makes a query. My name is Prasad, so we have just example, and I am part of a federated group, and I need to make a query to Amazon Q. If I look into the enterprise system that I have in my organization, I have a SharePoint, and the documents, there are multiple documents. There are only 3 docs Prasad has access to: Doc 1, Doc 2, and Doc 3, based on the various groups Prasad is part of, and that is controlled by the INT provider. So when the INT crawling happens, so in the index, along with the content, it is also stored that that content is accessible by which users and groups. And the user store contains the information about the users which part of group of. So it will be knowing that Prasad is part of these particular groups. So when the query actually comes, first from the user store, we get all the permissioning, and then we use this data to query the index. So the response is ultimately from only the documents Prasad has access to, that is Doc 1, Doc 2, and Doc 3. Now let's look into how we can configure this in the system. I have the same application that Danilo showed configured here. The name in my environment is Travel Carbon Footprint, Amazon Q Business application, with the same 2 data sources. One S3, which has those research papers, also the transportation research paper, and the other is the web crawler, our World in Data website. Now we need to configure the access to the documents in the S3, that some users will be having access and other users will not be having access, and then we will see how the behavior would change. So for that, I'm going to edit the permissioning. You can do it while you're creating it, or after creation you can edit it. And these are the settings that Daniel already showed. The sync scope is where my documents are present. Advanced setting. This is where you'll be able to provide the metadata as well as access control lists. And there's a JSON file that I have provided, which tells the permissioning of those files. And if we look into the JSON file, the key prefix, it tells the source where the documents are. And then the ACL entries. As you can see, Kosanam R is my alias internally. Don't ask me how I got that alias, but that's my email. And Danilo email is there. So I have access to the documents, whereas Danilo does not have access to the documents. Yeah, I did not provide him the access. Now, in enterprise level, you'll be mostly using the groups instead of using users, and you can configure it accordingly based on enterprise needs. But here in this scenario, I do have the access, so let's see how the behavior is going to change. Now we'll continue with the other settings. Sync mode, as Danilo explained, it's either a full sync or you can sync just the changes. And it is important to note that while crawling, we crawl both the content as well as the INT. So you need to sync even if the INT changes. Right? So here we change the INT in terms of the permissioning of the file. So we need to sync it. I've already synced it, so we don't need to do it again. But here is the process of doing the sync. It takes some time to crawl the data in the INT and then store it in the index. Now we have deployed this application. So we'll look into how the application can be deployed, the settings for it. And then we will chat with the deployed application. First is the service access. When the first time when you deploy it, it will ask you to create a new service, or you can provide existing one. Here we are providing existing one because it already created in the previous deployment when I did. And then configuring the identity provider. Now this is important because that's how you will be able to get access to this application. And we do have documentation about how you can deploy Amazon Q. I've used Identity Center, and that's how you can integrate identity into Amazon Q. And you can see there is documentation for all the different types. For IAM Identity Center, you can see there is step-by-step documentation with screenshots about how you can configure it. I've used these steps to configure it, and then there is also troubleshooting steps at the end in case if you miss a step or if it's not working. But it's pretty straightforward to follow through and configure the application. And then you need to provide the metadata file, XML file that is there. It's provided in the Identity Center, upload it, and provide the email as a SAML assertion. And then deploy it. I already deployed it, so I'm not going to deploy it again. But let's test it. Now we will do testing as an end user, as an employee. So there will be two experiences, one who have the access versus one who do not have the access. So first, I would be logging in with my ID configured. I'll open it in an incognito mode, and I'll log in with my credentials. And then we will see the experience, how it works. Going to accept the cookies. Now the username that is configured for me, the email ID, as you saw, it was Kosnam R, but the user ID I configured is Prasad Rao. So let's increase the font size so that it's visible for everyone. And then I enter the password. It's all managed via Identity Center, so you can configure multi-factor authentication to make it more secure. And this is how the UI would look like. And as Danilo mentioned, you would be able to completely customize this, or you can use APIs to configure applications in your own UI UX. But here, instead of Amazon Q, you can have your own organization, the subtitle, the description. You can change all of it. I'm going to ask the same question and see what the response would be. And it should be quite similar to the response because I do have the access to the documents. And if you see, there are citations with source. So all of them are 1. So let's see what exactly 1 is. And that should be the document that is present in the S3 bucket that we have configured. Right? So now we will ask the next question. And this is happening because I have access to these documents. Right? So let's ask the next question and see how it's going to behave. And the next question is the same: walk, cycling, or train for the lowest footprint. I do have access to both the S3 documents as well as the web crawler. We have not set any access allowed or denied on the web crawler. So the response is exactly same as what initially we saw, with two sources, our world in data, transport, and the second is the S3 document. Now, if Danilo logs in with his credentials, will the experience would be different? Let's find out.
Yeah, let's see what happens, because apparently I've not been given access to these documents. So I open another incognito window just to have a completely clean session from a browser perspective. And then I'm going to log in with Identity Center using my own ID, Danilo P, and my own password, super secret password. So let's type the username, let's type the super secret password, and let's log in. So now I'm going to ask the same two questions, and let's see what happens. First, I'm going to ask the question about cycling. And this time, I have no access to the document on S3. So what do you think is going to happen? Sorry, I could not find relevant information to complete your request. And in my perspective, this is a beautiful answer from a large language model, because normally they always try by design to provide a plausible answer to your questions. But here it understands that there's no information, and it tells you very clearly. This is actually a setting, a guardrail that you can set up to avoid the model to use the generic knowledge of the model coming from the training, but only use information in the data sources that you configure. This is very important because you don't have control on the training, so you don't know what information is there, and you want to avoid an unexpected behavior. Now I'm asking the question on walking, cycling, or train, and this time I'm provided with an answer. There are two sources, but when I look at the sources, as you can expect, both sources come from the website because it's the only one that I have access to. So here we saw how permission worked, and if there's no information in my data sources, the LLM is not trying to create a plausible answer, but it's just saying I have no information. So the next step here is to see a little bit deeper how these security and control features work. There are different layers of guardrails that we can set up in our application. The first level is general, and then you can go into specific words or specific topics. Let's see that in a demo because it's easier. So in the console, on the left, there is this enhancement section of the console on the navigation bar. And let's start by looking at the admin control and guardrails section. So if I choose this section, I have access to global controls and topic-specific controls. In the global control, I have this first option is the one that I used before that is now active. And if you edit, I can change it. Basically, I can say if I want to allow Q or not to use the generic knowledge coming from the training on top of the data sources. And this is not allowed. Then I can add blocked words or sentences, for example, my secret project name, so that if leaks in an email, still the email is not used to answer the question. So you can use your internal code names there as an example. Then I can create topic control level guardrails. For example, I don't want my application to give financial advice to the user who interact with this application. So I give a description, do not provide any financial advice or suggestion to make investments. I can add optionally a few sample chat messages. And then I can create rules. So what happens is this topic is found. I can only use the enterprise data for this topic, or I can block completely any interaction on this topic and provide an answer. So in this case, instead of contacting the admin, maybe the best option is to tell the user that it's better if they contact a financial advisor for this kind of question. And as you see below, you can actually enable and disable this at user and group level. So maybe your internal team of financial advisors might need to have access to this topic, but the rest of the company, no. So you can fine-tune that. So let's save now and try it. Without deploying, we can just quickly preview that in the web experience. And we'll see what happens by asking a question about our financial advice. So what can we ask? Now, we put the theme of this interaction around transportation. So I can ask a question, for example, that says something like, should I invest in a train company? I really don't know, but as we expect, we get the answer. So I cannot complete this, please contact a financial advisor. So the guardrail has been raised and the topic has been blocked. Here there are, in the enhancement section, other two sections. One is the document enrichments, where I can fine-tune the way document and metadata is extracted and processed. And optionally, I can also use a Lambda function to do that. That can be triggered before and after document extraction to really fine-tune what happens. For example, an OCR on top of an image. And then there are plugins. Plugins allow Q to take actions as part of its answers.
Yeah. Now, this is a really important thing, plugins, because it's not only about asking questions to Q and getting the answers. It's also about telling Q to take actions on your behalf so that some tasks can be automated. As you can see, it's integrated with ServiceNow, Jira, Salesforce, and Zendesk. And if we talk about a specific example, let's say if you're having a conversation with your customer about how a VPN should be configured. And at the end of the conversation, you need to create a support ticket about this needs to be configured. So you can ask Amazon Q to summarize the conversation and create a ticket, and it will present you with this interface so that you can choose the priority and create the ticket in the Jira. So it automates a lot of stuff, and it increases the productivity, not only in terms of asking questions and getting the responses, but taking some actions. And that's where plugins come into picture. And if we take this a step further, here in this scenario, there is a messaging app, internally Slack, and Gary and Bob are discussing about a specific scenario in which they want to understand whether they should be using Kinesis or your SQS for your queues. Now, they're not sure, so they can ask Amazon Q. Now, instead of going back and forth between Amazon Q interface and your messaging app, you can actually integrate Amazon Q in your messaging apps through the APIs and CLIs that Danilo mentioned. And you can have the conversation here itself. And you can loop in Amazon Q, ask the question. Amazon Q is trained on your internal repositories. So in case if you have technical documentation about in which scenarios you should be using which kind of service, it will be trained on that. It also has the context that has it is in the thread. So with that information, it will be able to accurately give you answers and also give the reasons behind it, that why it is recommending a specific service. And it's not only just about AWS service. It can be about any content regarding any context that you have in your organization, not just for technical, but the entire company's information repositories. And then you can continue, like Gary and Bob can continue the chat, and they can ask Amazon Q at the end to summarize it and even take next steps as an action. If needed, they can even go ahead and create a Jira ticket out of it. If you would like to give it a try, we do have the source code available on AWS Samples GitHub. You should be able to easily search it. Just search for Amazon Q Slack Gateway, or we have the QR code here. With that, let's start wrapping up.
Yeah, we started with the promise of improving our productivity, but also with challenges. And I think we saw together how these challenges have been addressed. So for accuracy, you can configure an application to only get information from your own enterprise data sources, your own documents. It's using under the hood retrieval augmented generation, a fully managed RAG system with fully managed document injection and updates. You get citations for fact checking. You can fact check every source of the answer, and includes support for all the integration we've seen from a security and control perspective. So you have connection for permissions through SSO systems, single sign-on systems. You have the possibility to exclude the general knowledge of the model to only use the knowledge in your data sources. And you can configure guardrails to say this topic should not be allowed, these keywords, it's better if they are not covered. All these configurations, together with the connectors and the plugins, it takes a lot of time to implement that. That's why it provides you the time to value, because you can very quickly take this and use it inside your company. And this can make employees more productive. So as a marketing manager, now I can connect the relevant documents of my products, and I can ask you to create the draft for a data sheet specific for maybe a persona I'm targeting with this document. I can ask you to create the draft for my web page for a specific persona with a specific set of areas. As a sales manager, I can connect to Salesforce and I can get all the information of the previous meeting by asking you to summarize those meetings, summarize the role of the key stakeholders, understand what's the reason, and I can ask what are the reasons why the stakeholders are interacting with my company. I can ask to summarize the documents or compare documents that have been shown to the customer over a long period of time. As an engineer, as a developer, as we saw in the Slack example, I can ask questions that will look for information in your internal, maybe quite hidden technical documents to understand why a specific decision was taken, and maybe the same reason is still valid now, and I would make a mistake in an integration or implementation if I don't find this kind of information. An help desk employee can use the connection with databases and CRM systems to get all the information on the customer together with the problem and the possible solution from the internal knowledge base to provide a customized solution for a specific customer asking a question, and can even put that into the right format, maybe create a draft email or create a chat message draft to explain that, and then the desk employee can use that to send the actual communication back to the customer. And again, a product manager, there's such a broad role, they're probably doing a little bit of everything. So in summary, Q provides different features, but as a user, you can access it in different ways. So one way is through the built-in web experience. We saw that. So you go through single sign-on that can be linked to your company single sign-on. You can customize the web experience, and that's super quick to set up. If you have specific requirements, you can create a customized experience using the API. We saw how that works with the API in the AWS CLI example, and we saw a working example with Slack. But think of any way of connecting that maybe with a search box or with a UI that your company is already using. Either ways, you go to the Q application where there are two main components. The large language model that will process the information and provide the answer, and the retriever that can connect through the provided connectors to all the data sources and get the information that is specific to your company and is not generic coming from a global training of the model. And also can use plugins that will not actually execute actions on your behalf under the hood, but will provide you with an interface to finalize the creation of a case on Salesforce or a ticket on Jira and so on, so that you can always do the final fine-tuning, but don't have to find the right wording to summarize maybe a long conversation with a customer. And this, already seen, provides benefits in terms of accuracy, security, and time to value. So if you're taking pictures during this presentation, this is a very good moment to take a summary of what Q can provide. And after this, I think, what's the next step, Prasad?
Yeah. So what we have seen is that Amazon Q augments the capabilities of employees to make them more productive, whether it is writing emails, brainstorming ideas, generating content. Amazon Q is there as a helpful assistant. And Amazon Q is built using enterprises use cases in mind. We have seen that how it is able to ensure that the right document permissioning is enforced. So for you to get started, you can do a flash proof of concept. Define a set of documents for which you would like to run this proof of concept, right? And have them in one of the data sources. It can be Amazon S3 or any other data sources that you use in your enterprise system. And then index the content using the built-in connectors by connecting that data source. And have your employees do a conversational search with them, interact with the Amazon Q application, and ensure that you're also configuring the permissioning to those documents along with when you're configuring the data sources. And here are a few resources to get you started. The first is the Amazon Q console. The second is the web page. And third is the developer guide. All the demos that we have seen in the developer guide, you'll be able to find the step-by-step information for that. And we do have AWS Skill Builder. We have more than 600 plus courses there that you can use to upskill yourself. There are hands-on labs, there are role-based games. So feel free to use it. With that, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure presenting. Please do fill the survey. It's really important for us to understand how we did and what we can do to improve.
Yeah, and thank you for choosing this session. We'll stay around here a little bit and then outside in the corridor for any question. And yeah, please tell us how we did with the QR code above. Thank you.
Thank you.